Hello and welcome in. Thank you for joining me for today's conversation. And the conversation is going to surround Minnesota Vikings general manager Rick Spielman and whether or not he is going to be fired or retained following the conclusion of the 2021 campaign, regardless of how the rest of this regular season plays out. Because I think that there is a real world scenario, and there's a couple of reasons that we need to be prepared for on why Rick Spielman could still have his job as Vikings GM at least for the 2022 season. I almost stumbled on that one. So here's the deal. We've been kind of looking at this through one lens, and that's through the lens of a fan of the team. And I want to remove myself today as a fan of the team and just look at it as an evaluator from an outside perspective, because we have to sort of look at this from two different angles. Like we're already really heavily invested in the fan aspect of this because it's not producing wins, and it hasn't for a couple of years now, and we're kind of at our rope's end and we want change. And you're probably telling yourself, hey, you're one of the more vocal people on your channel and social media saying that you want, change to come in the form of a clean slate, being the front office being totally gutted and this coaching staff being removed, fired, whatever the case may be. And those are all true things. I have called for all of that, and I will continue to call for all of that. But here's the crazy thing about it is that I think that there's a couple things that could keep Rick Spielman here, and I would buy into it if that ends up being the case. So what I want to do for this video is I want to have a conversation about Rick Spielman. I want to talk about some of the reasons that I kind of think that he might be able to keep his job regardless of what happens for the rest of the season. And then I'm going to conclude with the unfortunate reality that surrounds Rick Spielman, and that his time might be up with Minnesota because of some of the more recent mistakes that he has made. So let's begin with the good stuff. Let's begin with why I think that Rick Spielman could potentially have his job saved and given one more chance with the Minnesota Vikings as the general manager and executive vice president of this team beyond 2021. So number one, he has tenure. He's been here for a very long time. And if you know anything about the Wilf family, from what I understand, they sort of look at a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers and kind of envy what they're able to do, right? Consistency, not going through massive structural changes, whether it be front office or coaching staff. They've only had 3 head coaches for longer than I've been alive. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and now Mike Tomlin. And it doesn't look like Mike Tomlin is going anywhere anytime soon, especially after we saw what he said about the rumors of him potentially going to coach USC. And he completely shut those down. And he's right. He has one of the better jobs in all of sports because they don't make changes. They give their coaches time. They like to go through the motions, and they don't have knee-jerk reactions with that franchise. And it's one of the more well-run organizations in football and maybe all of sports. So the fact that Rick Spielman has been here for a long time, I think gives him an edge. Also, the thing that gives him an edge is the fact that the Will family likes him. And you don't like somebody or not like somebody and keep them around that long, even with some of the results that we've seen over the past couple of years. So I think that those two things give him an enormous power grab, because he could easily pitch his defense, if the Will family is looking to make a change. He could easily pitch his defense on the fact that he's been there. He's acquired all of these good players, which is another point that I kept coming back to. The fact that Rick Spielman, we criticized him a lot for the team, but what's one of the things that we ourselves have said, especially this year, and especially the last couple of weeks, as this team has lost a couple of games in a row, we always come back and say, you know what, this team is too talented to be losing like this, and we want Mike Zimmer fired because he's not taking advantage of the talent that has been given to him. Well, think about that. Turn that argument on its head. Who is giving him that talent? Does Mike Zimmer have full autonomy over the roster? I don't think so. The fact that Rick Spielman has drafted well enough to give this team, the youthful foundation that it currently has to make it an attractive job opening should Mike Zimmer be fired, I think gives Rick Spielman an advantage to keep his job beyond this season. I really do, because you look, just going back to 2015, he's drafted Eric Kendricks, Daniil Hunter, Stephon Diggs, Mackenzie Alexander, even Stephen Weatherly and Jaron Kearse, who were 7th-round picks, have been contributors in this league. Then you get Dalvin Cook, Brian O'Neill, Tyler Conklin, who is coming into his own this year. Daniel Carlson didn't work out in Minnesota, but he's the starting kicker for the Raiders, and he's worked out pretty well over there. That's a Mike Zimmer problem, and he wasn't able to solve the kicker issue with a young kicker. Irv Smith Jr., who was on his way to having a breakout season before he got injured. Alexander Mattison, one of the more quality backup running backs in the league. And then, of course, they get Justin Jefferson, a star wide receiver in this league. And then KJ Osborne, who myself thought was going to be having a hard time just getting a roster spot after his not complete absence during his rookie campaign. And then all of a sudden, boom, he breaks out and he is a serviceable wide receiver 3 for the Minnesota Vikings. And even this draft, look at Christian Darrisaw, who, yes, he missed the first 4 weeks with the injury. There was some questions about that, but since he's taken over for Rashad Hill at left tackle, I think it's been 4 pressures allowed in over 130 snaps that were pass protection snaps. I mean, that's the best rate among rookies this year. So I think Christian Darrisaw, the jury is still out, but he's on his way to becoming a solid foundational left tackle. And then you look at the other guys that have been contributing this year. Kenny Nwangu just had his, welcome to the NFL game. Cameron Bynum stepped in, playing out of position even because he's a corner that is transitioned to safety and wasn't even supposed to be taking over for Harrison Smith. He's been practicing in case that Xavier Woods would miss time or play poorly. So, hats off to that guy. And then Kenny Willeks comes out, and it's just, I know it sounds like that I'm, gushing over the draft picks that Rick Spielman has made during his time here. But the fact is that, you got to point out the good stuff. And I know there's a whole bunch of bad stuff, right? Mike Hughes and Jeff Gladney and Laquan Treadwell, and there's a whole lot of misses in there. But the fact is, he's drafted well enough to give this team a really solid foundational core with youthful players. I mean, it could be worse. I mean, look at the Las Vegas Raiders with Mike Mayock and how poorly they've drafted since they've hired him. Taking Clelin Ferrell, number 4 overall, bust. They took Tanner Muse 1 year. He's no longer with the team. Then you got, of course, Henry Ruggs and Damon Arnett no longer with the team because of off-field problems. I think Colton Miller has been their only hit. Brian Edwards is a starting wide receiver, and Amik Robertson, who was a guy that I liked, I think he was from Louisiana Tech, is a backup / practice squad player. So it could always be worse. It could always be way worse. And I think Rick Spielman has done well enough as a drafter, if you will, to sort of give him another edge over, potentially being fired this year. So those are all the good things that he could sort of pump up his resume with to keep his job beyond 2021. But unfortunately, I think the negatives outweigh the pros. And the negatives are the panic trades for 2 straight years, Yannick Ngakoue, and then this year, Chris Herndon, which has cost his team draft capital, trading away guys for nothing, Mike Hughes, Stephen Weatherly, just to give to, I know Stephen Weatherly was unhappy with playing time and Mike Hughes is injury prone, but still, I mean, battle of attrition, you need depth. You shouldn't have done that. I think the Harrison Smith extension was highway robbery. Probably shouldn't have done that. I understand why. You're rewarding a career loyal player to your franchise. I get that, but at the same time, I think it's highway robbery given his age and potential decline. The free agent spending in general hasn't been good because when you're spending free agent money against the salary cap, you should be buying wins and not buying players. And that hasn't translated to any sort of fruitful increase in the win column for the past couple of years. Kirk's extension after the $84 million original guaranteed 3-year contract, I think was a huge mistake to, free up cap space and then give Kirk more money later down the road, because next year with the $45 million cap hit, we're facing excruciating hard times potentially if that doesn't get reworked. I was a fan of the original, I wasn't a fan of the original contract, but I could understand that and give more leeway for it. The extension makes no sense to me. Not being able to figure out the quarterback position is probably his biggest issue. And in a league where the teams live and die by good quarterback play, that's something that you can't have on your resume as a general manager. The Christian Ponder pick did not work out. He was a bust. Teddy Bridgewater, that's a wash because of the injury. You'll never know. Sam Bradford is another one of those. Let's circle back to the desperation trades that they made. They felt like they had to do that in the time, and they got raked over the coals for it. They didn't have a first-round pick the next year. And then, of course, we all know Sam Bradford, injury-prone as hell, ends up having statistically a decent season, but they go 8-8, and then next year it's the Case Keenum show. And then Kirk Cousins, I believe that we have seen zero return on investment with that move by Rick Spielman bringing him in. Prior to Kirk Cousins' arrival during the Mike Zimmer era, the Vikings were 31-25 with 2 playoff appearances over the course of 4 seasons. Since Kirk Cousins has been brought to town on his massive contract and his even bigger extension, the Vikings are 28-27-1 during that time span, or between 2018 and 2021, with 1 playoff appearance, and it looks like we're going to miss the playoffs this year, or at least backpedal into them. So I think that the negatives outweigh the pros, but I did want to outline some of the reasons that we could potentially see Rick Spielman be retained by the Wilf family and the Minnesota Vikings as the general manager and executive vice president moving forward past the 2021 season. But so that's just something to keep in mind as we go through the motions for the rest of the season and guys make their cases to keep their jobs. I do think that the negatives outweigh the positives for Rick Spielman here, but the fact that he has an in with the Wilf family, he's well liked by them. He has been here forever. He has, tenure, if you will, and he does draft very well. I think that those are reasons that he could be kept. But at the end of the day, if we're being serious about this team taking the next step, being Super Bowl contenders, being feared week in and week out as an opposition, the quarterback position and the failures at that have been the biggest egregious for Rick Spielman during his time as a Minnesota Vikings GM, and that's where I'm going to leave it. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.